A day in the life. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his brow as he finished recalibrating the last of the station's atmospheric regulators. Being the only human on Starbase Zeta-9 meant he was often called upon for tasks that the station's regular inhabitants found challenging, whether it was his opposable thumbs, his resistance to certain chemicals, or simply his willingness to crawl into tight spaces. Jake had become an indispensable part of the station's maintenance crew. "Jake, friend," chirped a voice behind him. Jake turned to see Zix, a Vexillion that resembled a cross between a ferret and a palm tree. "Your assistance is required in the recreational sector. The gravity plating is malfunctioning again." Jake sighed, but a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Again. I swear, those Jovian merchants must be doing the chechev up there. Lead the way, Zix." As they made their way through the bustling corridors of Zeta-9, Jake marveled at the diversity around him. Creatures of all shapes, sizes, and consistencies hurried about their business. Some floated, some slithered, and some moved in ways that defied description. 5 years ago, Jake had been a college dropout working at a fast food joint in Ohio. Now he was living his childhood dream of exploring the stars, even if it meant spending more time fixing malfunctioning equipment than making first contact. They passed the station's central atrium, a vast open space filled with alien flora from 100 different worlds. At its center stood a holographic representation of the Milky Way, slowly rotating and sparkling with countless stars. Jake paused for a moment, as he often did, to stare at the tiny blue dot that represented Earth. "Jake, friend." Zix's tendrils curled in what Jake had learned was a gesture of concern. "Does the sight of your home world cause you distress?" Jake shook his head, smiling. "Nah, Zix. Just reminds me how far I've come. Come on, let's go wrangle those gravity plates before someone ends up on the ceiling." As they approached the recreational sector, a cacophony of alien languages and laughter reached Jake's ears. The sector housed various entertainment venues, including the station's famous zero-gravity dance club and the interspecies daycare center. Jake had helped design some of the safety features for the daycare, ensuring that it could accommodate young ones from a variety of species with wildly different environmental needs. "Ah, Jake Human," a voice like tinkling crystals called out. Station Director Lyrella, a being composed of shimmering energy contained within a humanoid force field, approached them. "I trust Zix has informed you of our gravity situation." Jake nodded, already pulling out his multi-tool. "Yes, Director. I'll have it sorted out in no time. Though I have to ask, have you considered my suggestion about reinforcing the plating? These constant malfunctions can't be good for station morale." Lyrella's form flickered in what Jake had come to recognize as amusement. "Always thinking ahead, aren't you, Jake? Very well, submit a formal proposal, and I'll consider it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a trade negotiation with some rather prickly Thoraxians to oversee." As Lyrella glided away, Jake turned to Zix with a grin. "Well, buddy, shall we defy gravity?" Zix's tendrils waved enthusiastically. "Indeed, Jake friend. Your Earth sayings never cease to amuse and confuse me." Jake chuckled as they made their way to the malfunctioning section. Just another day in the life of the galaxy's most out-of-place handyman. Little did he know that before the day was out, he would face a challenge that would test not just his technical skills, but his very humanity. The unexpected crisis. Jake was elbow-deep in the gravity plating control panel when the first alarm sounded. At first, he dismissed it as another minor malfunction. Alarms weren't uncommon on a station as diverse and complex as Zeta-9. But when a second, more urgent klaxon joined the first, he knew something was seriously wrong. "Zix," he called to his assistant, who was holding a luminescent tool that served as both light source and diagnostic scanner. "What's going on?" Zix's tendrils were vibrating rapidly, a sign of distress. "Jake friend, the station's central computer reports a fire in the multi-environment hatchery." Jake's blood ran cold. The multi-environment hatchery was part of the interspecies daycare center, specially designed to house the youngest and most vulnerable inhabitants of the station. It contained multiple sealed chambers, each tailored to the specific needs of different alien species, from sub-zero temperatures for the crystalline frostwalkers to superheated plasma environments for the energy-based luminae. "We need to get down there. Now," Jake shouted, already sprinting towards the nearest emergency lift. Zix scuttled after him, all 6 of its legs working overtime to keep up. As they descended towards the daycare level, Jake's mind raced. How could a fire have started in a facility designed to house such diverse and potentially volatile environments? And more importantly, how many children were trapped inside? The lift doors opened to chaos. Aliens of all species were rushing about, some trying to reach the hatchery, others fleeing in panic. Through the throng, Jake could see thick, oily smoke pouring from the entrance to the daycare center. "Jake Human," a familiar voice called out. It was Nix-Nax, the Aquilian caretaker of the daycare. Her usually iridescent scales were dull with fear, and her gills were flapping rapidly in distress. "The fire suppression systems have malfunctioned. We've evacuated most of the children, but the hatchery, it sealed itself off." Jake's heart sank. The hatchery's automatic safety protocols must have activated, sealing the individual chambers to prevent cross-contamination of environments. But in this case, it had trapped the youngest and most helpless inhabitants inside with the spreading fire. "How many are still in there?" Jake demanded, already moving towards the smoke-filled entrance. Nix-Nax's voice quavered. "At least a dozen, maybe more. Jake Human, you can't go in there. The environments, they're lethal to most species." But Jake was already keying in his emergency override code on the daycare's main control panel. "Most species, yeah. But humans? We're pretty adaptable." The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a corridor filled with roiling smoke. Jake could feel the heat emanating from within. And somewhere in the distance, he heard the terrified cries of alien children. He turned to Zix and Nix-Nax, his face set with determination. "I need you two to coordinate with station security. Get emergency response teams ready for each species we have in there. I'll need them standing by to receive the kids as I bring them out." Nix-Nax's scales shimmered with a mix of fear and hope. "But Jake Human, how will you survive the extreme environments?" Jake managed a grim smile as he pulled an emergency breather mask over his face. "Let's just say humans have a few tricks up our sleeves. Zix, remember that project I've been working on in my spare time?" Zix's tendrils curled in recognition. "The multi-environment suit. But Jake friend, you said it was untested." "No time like the present for a field test," Jake replied, tapping a sequence on his wrist computer. From various hidden compartments in his work uniform, pieces of advanced technology began to unfold and assemble themselves around his body. Within seconds, Jake was encased in a sleek, silvery suit that hummed with energy. "Wish me luck," he said, his voice slightly distorted by the suit's systems. "I'm going in." With that, Jake plunged into the smoke-filled corridor, leaving his stunned alien friends behind. As the acrid smoke swirled around him, and the heat intensified, one thought kept him moving forward. Somewhere in this inferno, children were trapped and afraid. And he was their only hope. The daring rescue. The interior of the multi-environment hatchery was a vision of hell, or rather, multiple hells, each tailored to a different alien species. Jake's suit sensors were going haywire, detecting temperature extremes and atmospheric compositions that would be instantly fatal to an unprotected human. He moved swiftly through the main corridor, his suit adjusting its protective field as he passed each sealed chamber. The fire seemed to have started in the central life support hub and was spreading through the ventilation systems. Smoke and flames licked at the transparent walls of the various habitats, each containing terrified alien infants. "Okay, Jake," he muttered to himself. "Prioritize. Start with the most vulnerable." He approached the nearest habitat, which housed 3 infant cryogens. beams of living ice whose bodies would literally melt in temperatures above freezing. The fire was rapidly approaching their chamber, and the environmental controls were failing. Jake keyed in the emergency override, and the door slid open with a blast of super-chilled air. The Kryogan infants, looking like delicate ice sculptures, huddled in a corner, their crystalline bodies flickering with fear. "Hey there, little ones," Jake said softly, his suit translating his words into the subsonic frequencies the Kryogans used to communicate. "Let's get you out of here." Carefully, he scooped up the fragile infants, his suit creating a protective bubble of cold around them. As he turned to leave, a support beam, weakened by the fire, crashed down behind him. Jake didn't hesitate. He leaped through the flames, shielding the Kryogan babies with his body. He emerged from the smoke-filled entrance, where Zix and a team of Kryogan medics were waiting. "Take them," Jake gasped, gently handing over the ice children. "I'm going back in." Before anyone could protest, Jake plunged back into the inferno. Chamber by chamber, he worked his way through the hatchery. He rescued a clutch of magma spawn from their cooling lava pool, the infant flame dancers who were paradoxically in danger of burning out in the intense heat, and even a single Void Walker child who existed partially in another dimension. Each rescue presented its own unique challenges. The caustic atmosphere of the acid cloud nursery ate away at his suit's shields. The absolute zero temperature of the dark matter creche pushed his life support systems to their limits. But Jake pressed on, driven by a determination that surprised even him. As he fought his way through the blaze, memories flashed through Jake's mind. He remembered the wonder he felt as a child, staring up at the stars and dreaming of alien worlds. He thought of all the times he'd felt out of place on Earth, never quite fitting in. And he realized that here, in this moment, he had found his purpose. The fire was spreading faster now, fueled by the volatile mix of alien atmospheres leaking from damaged habitats. Jake's suit was beeping warnings at him. Power levels critical, structural integrity failing. But he could hear one more cry for help, coming from the very heart of the blaze. In the central chamber, he found a single gelatinous egg, pulsing weakly. It was a quantum polymorph, a being capable of adapting to any environment, but only after it had hatched. In its vulnerable egg state, it was at the mercy of the elements. Jake's suit was falling apart around him, pieces of the advanced technology sloughing off in the intense heat. Warning sirens blared in his ears, telling him he had seconds before total system failure. But he couldn't leave this last child behind. With a final burst of strength, Jake scooped up the polymorph egg and ran for the exit. His vision was blurring, his lungs burning despite the breather mask. The world narrowed to a single point of light ahead. The exit. He burst through the doorway, just as a massive explosion rocked the hatchery behind him. The force of the blast sent him tumbling, but he curled his body around the precious egg, protecting it as he fell. As consciousness faded, Jake was aware of multiple alien hands reaching for him, of concerned voices in a dozen different languages. He managed to gasp out one sentence before the darkness took him. Are the kids okay?" Then, cradling the saved polymorph egg against his chest, Jake Morrison, the only human on Starbase Zeta-9, former college dropout and fast food worker, slipped into unconsciousness, unaware that his actions had just changed the course of human-alien relations forever. Aftermath and recognition. Jake's return to consciousness was a gradual process, punctuated by unfamiliar sensations and alien voices. As his eyes fluttered open, he found himself in the station's medical bay, surrounded by a diverse array of concerned faces, some with multiple eyes, others with no discernible features at all. The Jake human awakens. Zix's excited voice was the first he clearly recognized. The Vexillion's tendrils were waving in what Jake had come to understand as their equivalent of a relieved smile. "Easy there, big guy," Jake croaked, his throat raw from smoke inhalation. "What's the damage?" A holographic display flickered to life above his bed, showing a detailed scan of his body. Dr. Xylo, the station's chief medical officer, a being that looked like a cross between a giant squid and a redwood tree, extended one of her many tentacles to point at the display. You've suffered minor burns, smoke inhalation, and exposure to several exotic radiations, Dr. Xylo explained, her voice a soothing hum. Nothing our regenerative therapies can't handle. I must say, Jake Human, your species' resilience is quite remarkable. Jake managed a weak chuckle. Yeah, we're like cockroaches, hard to kill. He paused, sudden concern furrowing his brow. The kids, are they all okay? A new voice answered, one that sounded like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Thanks to you, Jake Morrison, every single child from the hatchery survived. Jake turned his head to see Station Director Lyrella floating nearby, her energy form glowing brighter than he'd ever seen before. Director, he said, trying to sit up before a wave of dizziness forced him back down. I'm sorry about the hatchery. I know the damage must be extensive. Lyrella's form shimmered in what Jake had learned was her species' equivalent of laughter. Jake, you saved over 24 children of a dozen different species, some of whom are the last of their kind. The hatchery can be rebuilt. What you've done, it's beyond value. As if on cue, the medical bay's doors slid open, and a procession of aliens began to file in. Jake recognized many of them as ambassadors and high-ranking officials from various species. Each approached his bed, offering gestures of gratitude that ranged from formal bows to the release of pheromones that made Jake's head spin. The Kryogan ambassador, a being of living ice, approached with 3 smaller figures. Our younglings wish to express their gratitude, Rescuer Jake, the ambassador said, its voice like cracking icicles. The 3 Kryogan children Jake had saved stepped forward. In perfect unison, they began to sing, their voices creating harmonies that made the very air vibrate. Though Jake couldn't understand the words, the emotion behind them was clear: gratitude, admiration, and a touch of awe. As the song faded, Jake felt a gentle tug on his blanket. He looked down to see a small, shimmering form, the newly hatched quantum polymorph he'd saved last. The infant being was shifting through various shapes, as if trying to find one that could adequately express its feelings. Finally, it settled on a miniature version of Jake himself, complete with a tiny, glowing heart visible in its chest. Jake felt a lump form in his throat. Hey there, little one, he said softly. Glad you made it. Director Lyrella floated closer, her energy field pulsing with what Jake recognized as intense emotion. Jake Morrison of Earth, she said, her voice resonating through the room. Your actions have demonstrated the very best of what humanity has to offer. You've shown us courage, selflessness, and an ability to adapt that rivals even our most advanced species. She paused, her form shimmering with significance. The Galactic Council has taken notice. They've expressed interest in opening formal. Director Lyrella's form shimmered with significance. The Galactic Council has taken notice. They've expressed interest in opening formal diplomatic relations with Earth, based largely on your actions here today. Jake's eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, what? But I'm nobody. I'm a maintenance worker who happened to be in the right place at the right time. An amused murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. The magma spawn ambassador, a being of living lava, stepped forward. Jake Human, you underestimate yourself. In our cultures, actions speak louder than titles or positions. You risk your life to save children who were not your own, of species not your own. That speaks volumes about the potential of humanity. Nix-Nax, the Aquilian caretaker, her scales now shimmering with joy, added, you didn't just save lives, Jake. You've given hope to species who had begun to view humans as nothing more than primitive newcomers to the galactic stage. Jake felt overwhelmed. He looked around the room, at the grateful faces of so many different species, at the children he'd saved, at his friends like Zix who were beaming with pride. For the first time since he'd accidentally stowed away on that alien ship 5 years ago, Jake felt like he truly belonged. I don't know what to say, Jake stammered, emotion thick in his voice. Zix's tendrils curled in amusement. Then say nothing, Jake friend. Your actions have said enough. As the impromptu celebration continued in the medical bay, news of Jake's heroism spread throughout Starbase Zeta-9 and beyond. Across the galaxy, on countless worlds, beings of all kinds were hearing the story of the human who braved fire and death to save alien children. It was a story that would be told and retold, growing with each telling, becoming legend. And on a small blue planet called Earth, unaware of the cosmic ripples they had caused, a species looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone in the universe. They wouldn't be wondering much longer. Part 5. A New Understanding. In the weeks that followed the fire, Starbase Zeta-9 underwent a transformation. The physical repairs to the hatchery were the least of the changes. There was a new energy on the station, a sense of unity and purpose that transcended species boundaries. Jake found himself at the center of it all, much to his initial discomfort. He had never been one for the spotlight, but he quickly realized that his new status gave him an opportunity to bridge gaps between different species and foster understanding. One morning, as Jake was helping to install new safety features in the rebuilt hatchery, he was surprised to find a group of young aliens waiting for him. They were of various species, some he recognized from the rescue, others who had only heard the stories. A young Vexillion, its tendrils barely sprouted, stepped forward. Jake human. It said in a voice like rustling leaves, "Will you teach us about Earth?" Jake blinked in surprise. "You want to learn about Earth? Why?" A Creogian child, its icy form shimmering with excitement, chimed in. "Because you're amazing. We want to know what makes humans so brave and adaptable." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "Trust me, kids, I'm not amazing. I'm just a guy who did what anyone would do in that situation. But," he added, seeing their eager faces, "I'd be happy to tell you about Earth." And so began what would become known as Jake's Earth classes. Several times a week, Jake would gather with a group of alien children and tell them stories of his home planet. He talked about Earth's diverse ecosystems, its varied cultures, its triumphs and its struggles. He shared tales of human resilience in the face of adversity, of scientific discoveries and artistic creations. The children were enthralled, and soon adult aliens began to sit in on the classes as well. Jake found himself fielding questions on everything from human biology to Earth cuisine. He even organized a movie night, showing classic Earth films to an audience of fascinated extraterrestrials. As Jake shared his knowledge and experiences, he found himself gaining a new perspective on his own species. Seeing humanity through alien eyes made him appreciate aspects of Earth culture he had previously taken for granted. He realized that humans, for all their flaws, possessed a unique combination of adaptability, creativity, and determination that made them well-suited for life among the stars. One day, as Jake was finishing up a lesson on Earth's oceans, Director Lyrella approached him. "Jake," she said, her energy form pulsing with excitement, "I have news. The Galactic Council has officially extended an invitation to Earth to join the interstellar community. They've requested that you be part of the first contact team." Jake was stunned. "Me? But I'm not a diplomat or a scientist. I'm just—" "You're the reason this is happening, Jake," Lyrella interrupted gently. "Your actions showed the galaxy the best of what humanity has to offer. Who better to help introduce Earth to the wonders of the universe?" As the reality of the situation sank in, Jake felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He thought about his life on Earth, how he had never quite fit in. He thought about his accidental journey to the stars and how he had found a home among aliens. And now he had the chance to help his entire species take their first steps into a larger world. "When do we leave?" Jake asked, a smile spreading across his face. The journey back to Earth was a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. As their ship approached the familiar blue marble, Jake stood at the viewport, a lump forming in his throat. He felt a gentle touch on his shoulder and turned to see Zix, who had insisted on accompanying him. "Are you ready, Jake friend?" Zix asked, tendrils curling with support. Jake took a deep breath, looking out at his home planet. "You know what, Zix? I think I am. It's time for humanity to join the galaxy." As the ship began its descent towards Earth, Jake Morrison, once a college dropout, then a cosmic handyman, now a bridge between worlds, prepared to introduce his species to the wonders of the universe. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, on a rebuilt hatchery in Starbase Zeta-9, a group of alien children gathered around a hologram of Earth, eager to learn more about the home of their hero. The story of Jake's rescue had started a chain reaction, one that would forever change the course of human history. As Earth took its first steps into the galactic community, it did so not with fear or aggression, but with the spirit of courage, adaptability, and compassion that Jake had demonstrated in that burning hatchery. And so, humanity's grand adventure among the stars truly began.